The title of my presentation is The African Diaspora in the United States, Gullah Geechee. For my project, I'm focusing on the Gullah Geechee people, which is a part of African diaspora in the United States. The Gullah Geechees are descendants of enslaved Africans who were brought from Central and West Africa. What makes them very unique is the fact that they held on to a lot of their original African culture. Due to the fact that they lived along coastal areas of Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. Because they lived in these more isolated island and coastal areas, their culture stayed very strong, instead of blending fully into mainstream American culture, keeping their traditions like language, food, and beliefs. Basically, they are one of the strongest examples of African culture still living in the U.S. today. Before getting into my main points, I'm going to give some background. The African diaspora is basically the spread of African people and culture outside of Africa because of slavery. A lot of African Americans today don't know their exact roots and culture, but some groups were able to hold on to theirs, like the Gullah Geechee, making them one of the best examples of this. Even though the U.S. mainly speaks English, the Gullah Geechee kept their own surreal language and a lot of older African traditions. Their ancestors lived on plantations or islands, more separated from others, which helps their traditions survive. You still see African influence in their music, their art, their food, even the way they speak. The problem or question of my research looks at is people often assume African Americans all share one culture, but groups like the Gullah Geechee show that they're really distinct communities in their own traditions. So my research looks at how they're able to keep that culture and how they're influenced American Africans culture in general. The two main questions that I focused on are how the Gullah Geechee kept their culture over time and how they influenced the larger African diaspora community. My thesis statement: many people think that all African Americans speak English and use a common culture, but the truth, as supported by my research on the African diaspora in the America, is that there are groups that have unique cultures and even their own language. So my thesis is basically saying that African American culture is not one thing. There are groups that still have very strong African roots, and the Gullah Geechees are proof of this. They've kept their culture identity in many ways that people don't even realize. For my roadmap, this is what I'm going to talk about. First, I'm going to show that not all African Americans lose their original traditions. The Gullah Geechees are a great example of this because they're found across 4 states and they've held on to things like their language, their food, their art, their music, and spiritual practices. I'll be talking about how their language, their food, other things like this, overall show their cultural heritage. All of these things help show how connected they still are to African traditions, even generations later. So that's the basic outline of the rest of the presentation. Thank you.